So don't give up. My name is Roberta Grossman, and I'm the Executive Director of Jewish Story Partners. Thank you, Hilary, for all the nice things you had to say about it. And thank you to the Museum of Tolerance for gathering us all here tonight. There could be no better place to be on Yom HaShoah, and no better film to see than the film we're about to see, Eli Weisel's Soul on Fire. Soul on Fire, as you're about to see, offers an intimate and powerful look at a man who transformed personal and national tragedy into a global call for moral responsibility. And the survivors, including the ones that are here tonight, have borne witness. Eli Weisel, chief witness among them. And they have taught us the urgency of storytelling. As the film you're about to see demonstrates, and this is my strong opinion, but I believe it's correct, film is the most powerful medium for recording, preserving, and sharing our stories. Jewish Story Partners is proud to have been one of the supporters of the film you're about to see. We are a non-profit film fund based in Los Angeles, and we're staked on the idea that storytelling is not just nice, like, you can get it, but actually essential. Not only for preserving memory, but for sparking dialogue, building empathy, and expanding understanding. We were launched in 2021 with lead support from Righteous Persons Foundation, and our mission is to support independent films that expand the Jewish story. In just a few years, we've awarded over $3 million to more than 100 films, this one among them. And we're helping to bring these stories, our stories, out into the world. I hope Soul on Fire resonates with you as deeply as it did with us. As Hilary said, don't miss out, don't cheat yourself, stay for the conversation with Dr. Stephen Smith and filmmaker Oren Rudavsky after the film. Please silence your cell phones, and now sit back for a pre-recorded introduction to the film by Eli Weisel's son, Elisha, and that will be followed immediately by Eli Weisel's Soul on Fire. Thank you very much.
Eli Weisel put a face to the Shoah from the perspective of a 15-year-old boy. We are honored to be presenting this outstanding film about the iconic author, educator, and activist who brought his story to the Holocaust to light and helped shape Holocaust education with his teachings and his books, including Night, shared in classrooms for decades throughout the world. The film is told primarily through Weisel's own words with unprecedented access to his family and archives. Oren Rudavsky's film is a revelation and a beautiful tribute to the Holocaust survivor, Nobel laureate, and teacher, Eli Weisel. In the words of Eli Weisel, quote, "I've given my life to the principle and the ideal of memory and remembrance," unquote. And that responsibility is now ours.
It doesn't have to be a Holocaust story, but as Eli makes clear, a story of survival from trauma. So for me, it was a message, it was my own guiding light, but it was also important that whoever watched the film brought that to the forefront of their brain in terms of, what am I going into this with experience, what am I going to come out from the theater with, and the importance, especially because, as we know, fewer and fewer Holocaust survivors, but any experience of trauma we've all been through, we need to hear those who have been through it and to speak about it.
You have, in 90 minutes, encapsulated what was several years, I would imagine, of work of delving into Eli Weisel, an Eli Weisel that we have not encountered in this way before. We've read his books, we've seen him present in public, we've attended lectures, we've known him in that context, but you have brought to life an Eli Weisel that we had never seen before through his own words, with no narrator except his own words. What did you discover about Eli Weisel that you didn't know before through that journey?
Well, I'm sure there are authors out there in the audience and people who have delve deeply into other people's lives. Number one, sometimes you make a film about somebody and at the end of it, you don't like them as much as you did at the beginning, or maybe even frequently. That was simply not the case with Eli Weisel. I mean, the deeper I went into hearing his words and talking to people who knew him, and I'll thank some people out in the crowd later who were in that position, but he embedded himself in me in a way that speaks to me and makes me feel like, actually, somebody said very early on, oh, what did Eli Weisel do? Well, he only spoke. And I'm like, and I bought into that for a while, but the deeper I went into this, the deeper I realized that many of us feel powerless these days. Speaking up is power. Don't forget that.
In fact, that was one of the themes of the film when I want to just, Roberta, wherever you are, I want to thank you for insisting that Jewish Story Partners focuses on feature-length movies. I want to say thank you to you because in the long format documentary that we have in front of us here, Oren, that you made, you took us into that moment with President Reagan and you lingered and you allowed the time for that to unfold. Talk about the decision as a filmmaker to bring us into that moment and take us all the way through that speaking up and truth to power.
Yes, controversial to some, but the whole premise of this film was that somebody like Eli Weisel, it's been debated as a W or V, but anyway, Eli Weisel, he lived. There are many more stories about him. There's much more to his life, and we decided as we make this film, we're going to do some things in depth, very well, completely, and not too much in my mind, because Bitburg was a key central chapter in this film. The one that I kept coming back to was the Bitburg speech, which I did cut by a few minutes. But when I listened to that speech, I said, I can't cut this speech. Basically, I can't cut this speech. Then I found that Oval Office material. And then, I wanted to give Ronald Reagan a chance to speak as well and make his case, and so on. So I think it's important when you tell a story, and I'm frankly much better at this form than the short form, but when you tell a story that's this important, that I dare say anybody in the room out there who's under the age of 50 probably knows very little about Bitburg or didn't know anything about it. It's just, you got to do it right, and that's what we tried to do.
We're watching this film on Yom HaShoah, and I'm so pleased that we're doing so here in the Museum of Tolerance and with survivors of the Shoah who are with us this evening. It feels to me like this movie is also a commemoration. It's a celebration of the life of Eli Weisel, but it feels it's also a commemoration of the time, because you take us into this place of memory, which is so central to his theme when he says, only memory will remain. Mm-hmm. To what extent is this a memorial to the Shoah as well as a biography of Eli Weisel?
Well, clearly the Shoah is, the Holocaust is our starting point. I guess I would put it differently, which is, I think, while Eli made a very strong point that the Shoah, the Holocaust, was unique, it's also, I think, important to take the message of witness and the message of recovery from trauma and what you're going to do with it. That to me, the Shoah is obviously one of the pillars of what Eli stood for and what this film is about. But equally important, I think, with the Shoah is to recognize that the Shoah is unique, but that every single one of us in our own ways has gone through some form of trauma, and every community around the world, so many have experienced disaster, and every one of us and every one of those communities' stories is important to honor and to be sensitive to. And if somebody's trauma is different than ours, it doesn't make it any less important to recognize.
And we get to know Eli Weisel, the survivor, the author, the father, the advocate, the teacher, in all these different phases that you take us through. But there was a moment in there that I found really quite magical, which was when you were in that classroom with those middle school children. You know, we're worried about the next generation, possibly with some really good reason, but you took us into a place that I've spent many years as the director of the Shoah Foundation, which is teaching young people about the Holocaust. And I saw when people would say to me as the director, you must have a terrible job because of what you do. I said, but you're not in the classrooms with us every day. You're not in this museum every day, seeing the way in which young people learn. You must have been in that classroom for a while. Either that or the teacher changed her clothes every break. So how much time did you spend with them? And why did you dedicate so much? And I was like, thank you for dedicating so much time for us to spend with those young people. And why did you do that?
Because as I think you alluded to, without young people and without cursing, we're screwed, right? I mean, without young people to both learn from us, but to also, what really happened in that classroom is the opposite, which is I learned from them. I mean, they blew my mind, and yes, I was there for 5 long sessions, like 3-hour sessions. There is a longer cut of that scene, which I think is, there's a lot of gems that are on the cutting room floor. But those kids blew my mind and understood, took the time. The teacher, Paris Murray, is phenomenal. The curriculum that was created was clearly phenomenal. So it takes more than, it just doesn't just happen magically, right? There's a whole series of people who think this through a great deal, what they're trying to teach. And so if there's any teachers out there, we need you more than most other professions. So those kids taught me a lot, and they understood the book so profoundly. So I spent a good deal of time in there because of that, because I knew that teaching and learning are key.
I think the most profound statement was when he said, Eli Weisel is free, Eliezer is not.
Yes, yeah, that was amazing.
And that profound insight coming from a 13-year-old about memory and identity was just really something. And thank you for bringing that to us. The other thing I would like to ask you about is just what you learned along this journey. How did this change you, either as a filmmaker or as a person? Because each of these, I mean, you've done many, many film projects over the years, and each have their own impact. But in what way did this film impact you?
I learned that there is greatness in people, speaking matters, action matters, and we're not all Eli Weisel. There are very, very few Eli Weisels. But again, we all must contribute and not feel powerless. Marion, for those of you who don't know, just passed away about a month ago, and as did several of the other people over the last 2 or 3 years. Larry Langer, a wonderful scholar, Ted Comet, died at 100 years old just a few weeks ago. There's Podwell, Mark Podwell, who spoke at Bitburg, passed away from cancer at too young an age, and contributed some of his illustration ideas to the animation. But Marion, wow, what a powerhouse! And I wish, if Eli were in this seat, he would really tell you, because Eli had those gifts, but Marion helped marshal them in immense ways in Eli's life, which I didn't get into, and I feel a little guilty that I didn't, besides translating his work and pushing him to reach out beyond the Jewish community. And I imagine, though she didn't say this, to hold his ground with President Reagan and in many other cases. She was just, and to hold me to a high standard, because believe me, she did, and I just want to tell one lovely story about her. 10 days before she passed, the film was shown at Lincoln Center, and she was there, as were many of the kids from the Newark school, and they got to interact with each other in a remarkable way. And she said to me afterwards, Oren, I want you to stand up and tell the crowd, I'm sorry it was so tough on you, number one. And number two, the only thing that upset me was the film made me fall in love with Eli all over again. But it's not just Marion, it's a whole family drama, and one of the other things I'm most proud of is being able to show this multi-generational portrait with its struggles and its challenges, and how a Holocaust survivor and second generation, and I'm sure there are second generation and third generation people here, that it pervades one's life in ways that one doesn't recognize till much later in one's life. So Marion was a gift, absolutely. Thank you for bringing her up. I appreciate that. And I just, the museum and Jewish Story Partners and the LA Jewish Film Festival. So
that I knew Eli Weisel over a good number of years. I will tell you that you completely reintroduced me to him. I have read his books, I knew him in person, we spent time together in different continents doing different work together. But there was a beauty about the way in which you revealed him in so many ways in his own voice. And I think it's that power of hearing him across decades that you brought to us this evening, where we see the consistency of his message, his struggle, as a young man, and then his struggles as he grows older, the weakness and the vulnerability of being a survivor, and also the strength and the resilience that he had to be able to bring us all into this place and space this evening. So I want to just thank you for reintroducing me to an Eli Weisel that I didn't know before watching this. I also know Elisha, and he told me the story of his father's death and what happened to him after, as he went on to fulfill his father's request to pray Kaddish, and how his identity evolved over time. And I thought you did such a beautiful job of bringing us into his life and into his home, because as you rightly said, as somebody rightly said earlier, the second and third generations are now carrying that memory, and you showed so beautifully how in that family, which are just a family, they happen to be the son and grandson and daughter of Eli Wiesel, but they're just a family carrying the burden and the memory. And when you took us into that cemetery at the end and just revealed the names, and so beautifully shot that scene of that, his grandson seeing his great-grandfather's name, the sort of the generation, the door-to-door message of this. So much of what we encounter when we confront the Holocaust is so devastating. And yet I felt that this was a film about hope, about the transition of memory, but also the transition to future generations. And I think I want to say on behalf of everybody here, thank you for doing that.